What's up, guys? I'm Brandon from Live Production Mastery, and today I'm going to go over the new Blackmagic announcement of the new Atem television studio switcher. They have two versions. They have a standard version with a built-in recorder, and then they have an ISO version that can do all 8 camera inputs plus program all recorded in ISO with the DaVinci Resolve file, etc. It's essentially a higher-end professional version of an Atem Mini Extreme ISO or the Atem SDI Extreme ISO. So let's get into it. First things first, the pricing. So the prices of these guys here, they have the $3,000 version, and then they have the $4,000 version. And they also announced a 6K Pro Studio camera with a bunch of cool features, including streaming, which is awesome, and the Atem microphone converter. This allows you to get 4 XLR inputs into your production switcher over MADI in and out, and you can stack these things. That's my favorite part about it, which means you could drop 2 of these, kind of loop them through each other, all via MADI, which is over SDI cables, and then get that into your production switcher, and then control everything from your production switcher or your audio board if it has MADI, things like that. But what I want to get into is the switcher itself. So essentially they're the same thing on the outside. On the inside, the difference is really cool thing, 2 terabyte internal storage that if you buy it like right now, like one of the first like groups that they're exporting, the 2 terabytes are coming free, pre-installed, which is great. If not, you're just gonna have to install your own SSD on the inside. But having internal storage is huge because it's not only a failover, but it means you have those 2 USB ports on the back, which we'll get to now, free for other things. So let's get into some of the components about here. And by the way, the biggest deal is like the new display on it's essentially like a bigger advanced panel. And I'm gonna get over to like the blank space used on the side, how I plan on using it, and things like that and why they have it. So the ports on the back, obviously this thing is packed to the brim, much more than a normal Atem SDI Extreme ISO. So we're going to start kind of over here in the middle. So power, obviously, we have a bunch of MADI in and outs, talkback. Most people are not really using these ports over here. MADI audio in and out, the reference, and then they just have, just more reference inputs, etc. What I really like about this, these are updates. These are things that they've seen people need in the Atem Mini Extreme series, and they've implemented it in the Pro series here. So multiple Ethernets. This is great for when you need to plug in internet directly to your board, and then you want to have a direct Ethernet instead of going through a Wi-Fi network or going through anything else like an outboard network switch, plugging it directly into your control laptop. Now, you can pretty much get away without using a control laptop. However, I'm going to highly suggest that you have one sitting next to your switcher, at least for the initial setup. Maybe once this is installed, you can probably take that away to make it simpler for someone to use. But there's a lot of features in this thing that you can only unlock using a laptop. They tried really hard so you didn't have to use a laptop, at least during the live production itself. You have all the controls on screen, but you're going to need that laptop for a lot of little things and kind of like the more pro level things you're going to want to do. Anyway, 4 Ethernets, that means you can link things together and you can connect directly to cameras and things like that over the Ethernet ports as well. That's huge. I don't believe it can do any PoE, so I don't think it's outputting any PoE for those cameras, but I had to dive in a little bit longer to take a look. Then you have 2 USB outs. These are great for recording to your flash memory and or using a webcam out or just getting control. Note that if you are using Companion, you still have to connect via Ethernet. That's how Companion works with IP addresses, not over USB. Anyway, let's get into the inputs and outputs here. All SDI switcher, that's great. It does have an HDMI MultiView. Thank you. These are great things we loved from the HD Television Studio series, and I'm glad they're keeping certain things and adding more to it. So let's talk about your ins and outs. 8 SDI inputs and then 8 SDI strictly program outputs, okay? They use this because when you connect the studio cameras and things like that, you need SDI running in both directions for camera control, program feed going to camera, and then the feed coming from the camera back to your switcher. So that's why they have these, and they gave you enough ports so you can run all 8 cameras or just have your program feed go to other things. It is a full program feed with the audio embedded, etc. And with these specific ports, you can change what audio is going where. Not really a mix minus, but they kind of call it that. So we'll dive into that in a sec. But Then you have two aux outs, you have a program out, and then you have a MultiView out via SDI, as well as, again, the HDMI MultiView out. So these are great. Would I like more program outputs? Yes. Could I do with this? Yes, because in most cases, we're doing a confidence monitor on stage, we're doing projectors in the room, and a live stream. Well, that covers literally those three things. Plus, you have your MultiView, and you could do a MultiView to an SDI monitor somewhere else, and you could do a MultiView with an HDMI monitor right in front of you, or vice versa. Plus, you have those other program outs that you can send if you're going to output a live stream feed to somewhere else in the room, if you're going to a web presenter as a backup stream, or that's your primary encoder, etc. Essentially, everything's baked into this guy, which is great. Less gear to take on site. It is significantly bigger than an Atem Mini Extreme, and you have your pros and cons here. Honestly, we're going to get to the end of the video. We'll kind of compare and contrast Atem Mini Extreme SDI ISO versus this guy, and what is more realistic taking on site. Right now, I'm leaning toward the Atem SDI Extreme ISO. That's more realistic to take on site if you're not super keen on all the buttons that you need. If you're really good with Companion and a laptop, you don't really need all the super fancy buttons. However, if you're installing this in a studio, you're definitely going to want something like this over an Atem Mini Extreme SDI ISO for a bunch of reasons, and part of it is just the professional feel and reliability of it, and so many more reasons on top of that. All the controls, so you don't have to dive into a computer, is going to make someone else sitting in that switcher seat a lot more comfortable. All right, so that is the ports. Then we get into audio. They're basically leveling up their audio game. They showed that with more MADI devices and with more inputs and outputs here. So they do have an RCA input. This is for an iPhone, any kind of like aux coming in that you want to like play background music, etc. That was what that was intended for. Obviously, you have your XLR inputs. This can be inputs coming from a larger outboard audio mixer coming in. This could be actual microphones, whatever you want that to be. Those are just two XLR inputs that you can run in stereo or mono channels. Then they have two sets of outputs. This is new. Like other switchers don't normally have this. They have a studio out and a control room out. The cool things about these is they are individually controlled, but essentially only with master volumes. Obviously, I don't have this sitting in front of me. I probably will pick one up just to play with it and test it. However, I would really like if these could have a legit mix minus on them. That way, when we're doing things with Zoom drones, right, bringing remote guests into our system, we don't really need an outboard audio mixer to handle a mix minus. Right now, people are using Roadcasters if they're kind of smaller, small studio setting. They're going bigger. They're using like a Personas, an Allen and Heath, a Midas, a Yamaha mixer, whatever it is, to do legit mix minuses and handle these more complex inputs and outputs going to all these laptops and remote guests. So can these do a mix minus? That is still to be determined. From what I saw in the video, they didn't advertise it. They didn't show it off. So my guess is no, but maybe that's a firmware update down the road. We can talk to Blackmagic about it and see if we can get legit mix minus so we can get rid of the full-on audio mixer needs. The great thing about Atem switchers is you can have multiple people controlling one single switch. So you can still have an audio guy handle everything, but he's just on a laptop and you're not needing to bring that additional hardware. Using SDI and MADI, we can now drop XLR inputs somewhere else in the room and get feeds coming into the switcher and then control them from a laptop or really anywhere on the network. You could pull up an iPad with mix effects and control things that way. So I'm really excited for these things here. But I would love a legit mix minus. And again, you can do that a little bit with the SDI outputs. When you have the studio cameras, they have XLR inputs on them, not so much XLR outputs. But if you can run somewhat of a mix minus to these guys, you might be able to use some of the Blackmagic converters to get audio out of an SDI feed and run speakers in the room that way. Have at least a little bit more control over it. Again, it's not perfect. You still, and I'm suggesting, need an outboard audio mixer until they come out with some updates that really unlock the mix minus features and more fine control. So that is the back of the unit here. Let's scroll up to the front of the unit. Obviously, my eye goes over here to the new display and controls. This essentially is controlling your cameras and your audio at a very, very high level. I'm sure with more firmware updates, this will also control things like super source. That's usually what this display up here is for. Maybe they'll lock this down to strictly audio and some other things, but I would love to see this get even more versatile than it already is. But I'm perfectly happy with the updates they're making now. So this is their new display for cameras and audio. You have your standard preview program down here. You got your shift button. These can control things like your aux feeds and whatnot. Then this is a 1ME panel, so you're not having two different types of outputs. You only have one kind of transition output, and then you have your two other auxes. So you have your keyers, you have your DVEs, your fade to blacks, your transitions, and things like that. Now over here, because this thing can now live stream, okay, this thing can now do internal records. And what's the other thing here? Oh, and then the media player stuff. So we have a record in and out, and same thing they did on the fade to black buttons. They put a kind of edge on them so you can't accidentally tap those buttons. So they are there for you to get quick reach to, but you're not going to accidentally hit them, and that's awesome. I'm really happy they did that with the stream. I probably would have liked that with the record as well, but it's okay. Then for the media player, they have a grab still button. This can input a still on your program feed and take it into your media player, so you can then use that for later use. Hold a still. If you want to take a screenshot of a wide shot and use that later to cut back to as a safety shot or something, you can do that. All right, let's dive in a little bit more here. The 2 terabytes on the inside is great. This does have a super source in it, by the way, as well as normal DVEs, so that's awesome. This is the super source. Really glad they included that in here. This is something that the original HD television studios did not have. Okay, they just give you some examples here. You have your aux, you have your projection screens. This is the confidence monitor, which can do a timer. They mentioned that, which is great to throw a timer on the confidence monitor for the talent. This has to be on aux 1. I don't know if it can output to aux 2, but they did mention on aux 1 the timer will output, so just know that when you're wiring things that you need that there. Obviously the full audio control. This is what that display can really do. Okay, you can do your master levels, you can do your gains, you can split things up left and right, so you can kind of split those into mono channels, even if it's stereo. You then have your EQ control, so you can select specific channels using the select button right under the display, and now I can adjust the EQ of a specific mic. Normally, you could do all this before, but it was not on the panel and not easily accessible. And these are kind of things that you do pre-live stream. You don't really edit these things during a live stream. You want to dial them in, but it's great that you can kind of do that from the panel now, and if you had to do it live, you can get it done. Okay, let's see what else here. We have the MultiView, fully assignable MultiView, just like the Atem Mini Extreme series, so that's great. And then, yes, you can connect your phone and stream as a backup. Not really a failover, but just another way to stream out, so that's great. Record direct to the SSDs or internal, and use it as a webcam. The DaVinci Resolve file, which we're all used to. Again, this is just an Atem SDI Extreme ISO on steroids, which is great. Okay, this is huge. This is brand new. The ability to bring in a remote camera over the internet. So you can use your phone and tether to your phone from the camera directly, no other hardware needed, and essentially it gives you a file to stream from the camera into the switcher. Now, obviously you're going to hit delays. If you actually have someone outside, let's say you're inside and you're on the outside of the building and you want to have someone come in and normally use a wireless transmitter system with microphones, essentially what you would do is hook the microphone up to the camera, and now you're getting a delayed feed, but at least it's all in sync, audio and video coming into the switcher to start your live stream. If you're on comms, this can work very well. And there's a bunch of different comm systems you can use for this. Unity is a very popular and cheap one, and it works essentially with an app on your phone. So if you don't know what that is but want to get into it, there's a really cheap, easy way to get into all this. Okay, for comms. You can also do comms. I don't know if it works over the streaming function like this, but camera control does work over streaming, which is awesome. So your cameraman does not need to be like super high end on like everything camera. Essentially just tell them to point where they need to point, and you could have a shader or someone else pulling focus, even pulling zoom on some of the cameras if you have the right lenses, and do full camera control and coloring with that. You can also just plug this via Ethernet directly into a hard line. I don't think these have Wi-Fi's. Maybe the new models do. I'll have to check into that. But essentially plug this into Ethernet, and then you are just using a normal local network or a non-local network. And you do have to configure like static IPs and stuff like that, which is a little more technical. You might want to get like a tech guy from the hotel or the event space or the venue to help you out with that. But if you are on a local network, like through a network switch, you don't even need to mess with that stuff. Essentially, it's going to pop up on your Atem software. I wonder if they show it here. They do not. But essentially, it's going to pop up on your local network in your Atem software, and you can just select, instead of saying this is an SDI feed, you're going to say this is one of my like stream cameras, and then you're going to bring it in that way. So now at a delay, and I'm hoping like the studio converters, where there's virtually no delay through the Blackmagic cameras over Ethernet, that this can soon get that close via a wired Ethernet connection. So you don't need that extra $1,000 studio converter, but I do not know that it's true, and I don't think that's really going to work the same way because this is using streaming technology, not like end-to-end like Ethernet as like a direct line. So this is like running through network switches and a network and a router and like making it through, which causes a lot of these delays. But it's a lot less than if you have a stream to Vimeo or YouTube or Facebook or anything like that. It's much, much faster than that. So that's super cool that we now have essentially wireless streamable cameras that the switcher can take in directly. It's not NDI, but we're getting closer and closer to bridging that gap where the vMix users and all the other users using NDI were like, that was a big deal. We're getting closer and closer to being able to compete and have a lot of crossover with those things. Okay. More modular. So essentially they were saying if you break components, a lot of pieces are just like replace this entire circuit board, which is a lot cheaper than replacing the whole unit, and you're good. So the top row of SDI ports and essentially all the ports on the top until you get over here to audio is one board. There's another board on the bottom, and then the audio is a whole other board. So like repairing these things should be pretty easy, and you can honestly do them yourselves if you're willing to take a screwdriver to your Atem. But if not, you can always send it in a repair, and they should be able to get repairs out to you rather quickly because they're just swapping whole components and not like resoldering specific pieces. So redundant power is awesome. Love that. And so this is the audio Atem microphone converter over MADI. Again, what I liked about this is it was scalable. So you can basically loop one converter into the other, and the way it comes into your switcher is they're just stacking 1 through 8. I don't know how much you can go, if you can go all the way up to like 16 microphones. I'm not sure yet, but this was great because now you don't really need, if you're just doing records, you don't really need a Rodecaster or an external audio board if you're just looking to record. You can pretty much drop this on the table, plug your high-end microphones into it. I assume because it is powered, it can handle 48 volts. You're going to want a computer, or at least to network this thing to like get control over it, probably to select the 48 volt outputs, etc. per microphone. But this is huge, so I really like the ability to get more XLRs. Usually we're plugging directly into camera. I don't know if there's going to be an audio delay or an audio sync issue, but I assume Blackmagic has accounted for that, and you can at least do frame delays, etc. So yeah, obviously they still have their classic shader and things like that. Going with fiber, you have your HyperDecks. They're just selling you other stuff here. But that is the gist here of what is happening. So I want to go over some of the notes I was taking during the live stream here. So in this converter, and let me go to, we'll stick with something like that. So obviously there are less aux outputs. I would love more auxes, assignable auxes. Like the amount of outputs is perfect. I don't need more. But when you get to using the studio cameras, and if you did end up using a studio converter, let me just go over to an actual studio converter here. Those are broadcasts. Where do they hold their studio converters? It's probably under the camera itself. So if we go down to where they have a studio converter, one of the things they pitch about it is the ability to, you have your SDI in and out, but you can also use the camera for the HDMI out on the camera itself to run to a confidence monitor. This is great for having like a script and running that through like a teleprompter. This could be great for putting a remote presenter up there so they can have a two-way communication while looking at the camera. There's so many reasons to do this. However, if you sacrifice the return feed and you plug something directly into it like a laptop or a teleprompter or something, you're losing the camera control. So some way to be able to use the ability to have that HDMI out go to a confidence monitor, so you don't need an extra converter, you don't need to run an extra SDI or Ethernet line to be able to do that. Some other way to get camera control to the camera, but utilize that one Ethernet cable, which with the studio converters can also do power, so that's great. So you're like simplifying at least 3, if not more, cables to your camera with one Ethernet cable. And Ethernet is a lot easier to make and kind of run than SDI is. 3 cables cost versus one. One of those cables is power. You still need power if you are going to do this with a TV sitting right next to it, but we can get into that later. And there's battery-powered monitors that you can use if you really wanted to just do this all without any cables at all. Yeah, and they did make some updates to the USB ports, etc. I don't know what the return audio is like. Again, Atems have a mix-minus capability, but we don't know like how amazing it is, and it's not that expandable or controllable. You kind of just have to pick a single feed going there or a single feed to take out going back to your camera. So that is the mix-minus capability. But the studio converters, if they can implement that essentially into the Atem HD television studio itself, then that would be great. All right, I'm going to scroll down here to some of my cons that I wrote out. There was the aux outs, maybe more of them. Maybe that's a firmware update. Probably not. It's probably a different model. The aux outs for mix-minus capabilities for audio, that would be great. Okay, here's one that a bunch of people have done videos on, but Blackmagic has not actually figured out a solution themselves, which is this is essentially a better advanced panel, right? A 1ME advanced panel. And we know 1ME advanced panels to be strictly controllers for larger ATEM switchers or even smaller ATEM switchers. So if there is a way, now that we have a newer, better advanced panel, to have this advanced panel, this Atem Television Studio HD, control a larger ATEM, like a 2ME, like a Constellation, something like that. I know we're missing like the buttons for the different MEs, but we can have workarounds for certain things. Being able to have this ATEM control a larger ATEM without having to go through Companion, that would be awesome. I'm very surprised Blackmagic has not done this. It makes sense. They're following the Apple route in a lot of ways. Even in their presentation, they're like, we have one more thing, and that shouted out to me, Steve Jobs from Apple back in the day. But they want to sell you as many products as possible. They do want to be very helpful, but they don't want to kill one of their own products by releasing a new one every single time, every 6 months. So they're fine killing their older, outdated products if they have to. So a way for one ATEM switcher, especially a tabletop switcher, to control maybe a rack mount switcher, that would be really, really helpful, and think a lot of people would like that a lot. Okay. And the last thing I wanted to touch on here was this blank space. So they said they needed to make this bigger to fit more into it. Absolutely agree, makes a lot of sense. However, from a lot of competitors, they're dropping a monitor in the in the tabletop controller itself, whether that's a MultiView or a program feed, and this blank space right over the Blackmagic logo looked like a great opportunity to drop a either MultiView or an aux out type of monitor. And there's a bunch of ways to do this. There's obviously plenty of auxes, plenty of program outputs on the back of this thing, right? We know there's just 8 sitting right up here. So that's a great way to do it. What I was thinking was, what if you got like a little 5-inch, this could even be the Blackmagic Video Assist, right? A little 5-inch monitor, and you could essentially Velcro it to the controller right here. Now, you could just have that be a program feed, because it's always great to have just a reference monitor program. Every time I look at it, I know what's going to my live stream. Essentially, if you wanted to do it this way, you could make your MultiView, all 16 boxes on your MultiView, and have your program feed go to this little 5-inch monitor right here. And if you are okay using something like that, personally, I like my preview, my program to be a little bit bigger. It just stands out to me more. But that seems like a great use of space right here. A bunch of people just take some gaff tape and they write on the gaff tape right here, and they'll make notes for themselves. They'll do, if they have certain presets or macros or anything like that, they use that a lot here. I have a feeling, by the way, if you click this macro button, because it's how the advanced panel works, then this top row right here will probably change to being macros. You might have to hold it down, etc. The other thing that you're not used to on the Atem mini series that you are used to on an advanced panel is the shift button. So you might look here and say, oh, there's only 10 buttons. How do I hit the super source? How do I hit all these other things? You just hit the shift button, and then this display changes to a new set of 10 things, and you can assign what button goes where on the advanced panel itself. Again, I'm calling this thing an advanced panel. It is the Atem Television Studio HD, the new one from Blackmagic, but it essentially works the same way. That's one thing I really do like. They almost never change their software. They only update it and add features, so you never have to learn something new. So if you're used to certain things, they don't change what works. That's awesome, and they're always adding more. So I really like that. It's a good use of space here. All of this blank space is great. Again, drop some gaff tape, different color gaff tape, put notes to yourself, whatever, instructions. It could be just reminders for things. And like that's what all this blank space is used for. Again, internally, they have a lot of data processing going on. And the full-size TBar is just always nice to have. What I use the full-size TBar for, usually when I need to do cuts or transitions, I'm using the cut or auto button. What I use the full-size TBar for is if I'm like at the beginning or in a break or at the end of a show and I want to hold on a wide shot, and then I want to have like some sort of graphic or holding slide come on screen but still kind of see the wide shot happening through it so people are walking around, etc. Or your pre-show and you have your talent, they're kind of talking and laughing and people can see like the live stream is about to happen, like things are happening in the background, but it's not important enough for them to really see clearly or hear. So it's a great way to let people know what's happening without having to like tell them like, hey, we're going to be in a break, so like hang out for 5 minutes. It's more like, hey, they can see people are in a break and they know what's coming up next from your graphic. So that's what I use the TBar for. A lot of times I actually have it halfway when I'm doing these things. Okay, so that's it. Long enough video there, but hopefully that was helpful. I wanted to talk through a lot of the features that I liked. Will I be picking one of these things up? Probably for me to test. I mean, I really do love Blackmagic. Just like, you have the crazy Apple users out there who love anything Apple does. I pretty much love anything Blackmagic does. I can be very critical of them, but hopefully it's all in good faith. And I think it's a great update. This to me screams more of a kind of built into a desk studio setting type switcher. If I was really going to run and gun with something like this, I'd probably stick with the Atem SDI Extreme ISO version, although they're making a great case by having built-in up to 2 terabyte. You can probably go even more, but they're shipping the first batch with 2 terabyte internal storage, which is a long time for records. Oh, and the kicker with that is that you can do cloud storage with automatic backups to like Dropbox or Google Drive or things like that with their Blackmagic Cloud interface. And one thing that's a lot harder to do with the Atem mini series that you can totally do with this is with a USB cable or a network cable for that matter, you can read the internal storage off of this guy. Okay, which means you record to your 2 terabyte internally, and it can either automatically back up to the cloud if it's connected to the internet and that's set up, or you can just drag and drop from what is essentially a network drive onto your computer or onto a different network drive. So if this is in a studio setting, you essentially just leave this plugged in and then walk over to your computer in your office that's also on the network and grab the files. That is super, super powerful. That's something we struggle here in this studio where it's not easy for us. We're actually dealing with physical SSDs and did we format it and things like that, because Blackmagic, I really hope Blackmagic has a way to format this drive on the switcher or in the switching software, and I don't need like to figure out how to reformat this drive over the network. That would be a bit of a pain. So I'm sure they've thought that through. If they don't, that'll totally be a firmware update to be able to erase this. And just like they have with their cameras and their video assists, it'll be like, do you want to erase? Are you sure? Are you really sure? Yes. And then hold it for like 3 seconds. So super, super powerful. I will be picking one up. If you are going to run and gun, it is a bit large, but it has a lot of features. The audio is not quite there enough for handling speakers in the room, plus your live stream feed, plus you can monitor your own audio. That's great. There is no headphone jack. I found that very interesting on this one. I would expect like a headphone jack on the front, but that's why they have the control room audio, so you can plug speakers in or route that to a pack that you can wear on your hip or something. So at least they have that. But this is that's my take on the new Atem Television Studio HD. Hope you guys like it, and yeah, thanks for watching.